This video is dedicated to what I would call a loose collection of classic fairy tales by the Folio Society. The books were not officially released as part of a collection, but the size and binding designs are complementary, and most of the works are facsimiles of volumes that were released during the period known as the Golden Age of Illustration, which lasted from approximately the 1880s until shortly after World War I. Many of the binding designs in this collection were redrawn by David Eccles from original work by the illustrators. William Heath Robinson was an English cartoonist and illustrator, best known for drawings of ridiculously complicated machines for achieving simple tasks. And in the UK, the term Heath Robinson contraption was used during World War I in much the same way that Rube Goldberg machine is used today in the US. Robinson first illustrated Hans Christian Andersen's Danish fairy tales and legends in 1897, and then again in 1913 when he illustrated a volume called Andersen's Fairy Tales, the book on which this Folio Society edition is based. This edition contains 17 of Andersen's most famous tales, including The Emperor's New Clothes, The Little Mermaid, The Snow Queen and The Ugly Duckling. Robinson's illustrations are lovely, and the book includes 16 colour plates and numerous black and white illustrations. The Folio Society volume of Fairy Tales by the Brothers Grimm is drawn from a mammoth collection first published in 1909, illustrated by Rackham. It features 40 full colour plates, plus over 60 black and white spot elements, and feels quite luxurious to read. Rackham is of course probably the best known in the Golden Age of illustrators, and Folio have published several volumes featuring his beautiful work. When Charles Perrault, a civil servant in Paris in the 17th century, heard his son's nurse recounting old French folk stories, he started to write them down. The Folio Society edition is taken from Sir Arthur Quiller Couch's 1910 translation, The Sleeping Beauty and Other Tales from Old French, complemented here by 30 colour paintings of Edmund Dulac, as well as black and white headpieces at the start of each story. Dulac was a French-born British naturalised illustrator who, in addition to his beautiful children's and fantasy illustrations, was also responsible for designing banknotes during World War II. First published in 1914, East of the Sun and West of the Moon is a celebrated collection of 15 fairy tales, gathered by legendary Norwegian folklorist Peter Christian Abjørnsen and Jørgen Moe on their journeys across Norway in the mid-19th century. Danish illustrator K. Nielsen provided 25 colour plates and 21 monochrome images for this collection, and the artwork is widely considered a jewel of the early 20th century children's literature. The images were reproduced at the time using a 4-colour process, in contrast to many of his contemporaries that used the more characteristic 3 colours. The cream binding on this facsimile is known as elephant hide, which is a type of vegetable parchment. I adore K. Nielsen's work, and this is an absolutely lovely volume, but it can be difficult to source second-hand. If you're interested, I think the recent Taschen edition of this book is well worth the investment. It reproduces the illustrations in vivid detail. It has a beautifully redesigned and very clear layout, and it includes close-ups and fascinating historical essays as well. I can make a comparison video if anyone's interested, but in the meantime I'll include a link to the Taschen edition in the description box as well, if you want to check it out. Edward Julius Detmold and his twin brother Charles Maurice were prolific Victorian book illustrators born in London in 1883. Their watercolours were influenced by traditional Japanese art and the Art Nouveau movement, and their work was already being exhibited at the Royal Academy when they were only 13. In 1903, at the age of 20, the twins were commissioned to produce 16 watercolours for Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book, which was tremendously successful, but tragically Maurice ended his life shortly after. Following this tragedy, Edward threw himself into his work, and in 1909 he produced 23 colour plates and a host of pen and ink drawings for the Fables of Aesop, and it's a facsimile of this edition which the Folio Society produced in 2006. Edward became renowned as one of the most talented illustrators of his time, particularly his depictions of plants and animals. In 1924, Hodder and Stoughton published the Arabian Nights with 12 colour plates, a change of direction for the artist into the realms of fantasy, and a facsimile of this edition was published by the Folio Society in 2003. Edward was known to be very painstaking in his work, so much so that he frequently missed deadlines, and it was shortly after this masterpiece he retired completely from public life. Nathaniel Hawthorne adapted the fanciful tales for children in his wonder book from classical mythology. Contained within are such memorable stories as The Gorgon's Head, The Chimera, and The Golden Touch. The original volume was first published in 1852, but the Folio Society edition is based on the 1892 edition, which has 60 illustrations by Walter Crane, including 19 colour plates. This volume was illustrated at the time when the William Morris Walter Crane inspired arts and crafts movement was at its height, and the full-page colour illustrations are classics of their type. The Wonder Book was followed by a second Wonder Book known as Tanglewood Tales, a rewriting of more ancient Greek myths for children. This volume includes Theseus and the Minotaur and Jason and the Golden Fleece. The Folio Society edition is based on the 1918 volume illustrated by Edmund Dulac, who also did Perrault's fairy tales, as I mentioned earlier, and it includes 14 full colour plates. Lamb's adaptations of 20 plays, first published in 1807, use small excerpts from Shakespeare and retain some of the feeling of the original, but they pare away subplots and characters and sanitise situations to make relatively simple stories appropriate for children. This reproduction of a 1909 edition contains 12 colour plates, each by a different artist. I consider it interesting from a historical point of view, but the archaic language and lack of illustrations could be a turn-off for most modern children. Far superior, I think, is the Folio Society version of A Midsummer Night's Dream, which is a truly lovely edition. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the story, which includes the adventures of young Athenian lovers and a group of amateur actors who are manipulated by the fairies. The text of this edition is taken from that first published by Constable & Co. in 1914, and the treatment of the play is exquisite. From the title page to the playful two-page spread that closes the book, there are delights on nearly every page. There are 12 full-page colour plates, but it's the variety of Robinson's black and white illustrations, 32 full-page and plentiful vignettes, that makes this book the ultimate graphic presentation of Shakespeare's beloved play. I also include in this collection one volume with contemporary illustrations. The Adventures of Robin Hood are here collected and retold by Roger Lancelin Green, a British children's writer and contemporary of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. The original version was published in 1956, and it is a lovely retelling, making use of many sources and portraying a wily Robin and a capable Marian. The Folio edition has some lovely contemporary illustrations drawn in a classic period style by Cambridge artist John Holder. If you'd like to see more beautiful books, please do hit subscribe. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments section. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you again next time.